TIFU by accidentally going on a date. I work in a professional setting where networking is very common. I met an older man, maybe in his 50s, while waiting in a lobby for a meeting and started chatting about what we do for work. We exchanged business cards, and when he followed up with me, I suggested we grab coffee so I can learn more about what he does. He told me he's busy during the day, and he'd prefer to shoot for an after-work meeting. I agreed and worked with his assistant to set up dinner. Well, dinner was interesting. The entire time, he told me how pretty I am and even insinuated that if we get to that point he would cook for me. It was about then that I realized this was in fact a date. It was solidified in my head when I realized he didn't have a wedding band on. FML. He paid for dinner, of course. After dinner, he stated that he wanted to walk me back to my office, and on the way, he took off his jacket and put it on me. He shifted to the outside of the sidewalk and insisted that as a woman I should be walking on the inside of the sidewalk. He then said that as long as I'm with him, I won't be touching any doors. Then he offered to walk me to my car, but I declined and thanked him. I think the worst part is that I'm in a serious relationship and didn't even mention my partner once, because at some point during the dinner he started talking about religion, so I didn't feel safe mentioning my partner I'm gay. My partner and I laughed it off later, but I still felt horrible. I definitely learned my lesson. TLDR, I accidentally went on a date with an older man and very quickly learned that apparently asking men to dinner is a date, even if asked in a professional setting. Edit typo fix. If they asked for an after-work meeting, in those words, that's a fuck-up on his part, not yours. A date is a date. A meeting is a meeting. And both are vastly different things in this context. So, my first impression here is that guys, and people in general, are terrible at figuring out if something is a date or not. But the fact that he got his assistant involved with scheduling it would indicate to most people that it's a professional encounter. So I do get the impression that he was taking advantage of the situation to push his own clear motives while you made no mistake. Oops. Have you heard from him since? Did you keep the jacket? He knew what he was doing. I think he knew you meant a platonic, pick your brain kind of networking meeting, but through sleight of hand with the whole after work thing he transformed the situation into a date because he was into you. That's on him, not on you. And how creepy is that? A friend of mine has accidentally been in similar situations. Her remedy to avoid it in the future has been to never agree to dinner. To her, breakfast is fine, lunch might be pushing it a bit, but dinner so many times insinuates it's a date instead of a professional networking opportunity. He didn't make his intentions clear that it was a date and assumed wrongly that you were on board. Sounds like you were faultless in this case and shouldn't feel bad about the encounter. Sometimes people want to believe that they still got it. You won't be touching any doors, cringe. Or a threat? Reminds me of a story my dad told me about hitchhiking in France in the 70s. He was picked up by an older gentleman. He was 14 at the time and driven to a whole-ass estate somewhere in the French countryside. Proper mansion. No other people, but lots of dogs. My dad didn't really speak French very well, but he managed to communicate that he wasn't interested. The guy luckily turned out to be decent and drove my dad close to the nearest town after that. Abu at 87 sure that guy was an actual vampire. I know men can get weird about paying, but wouldn't you want to insist on splitting the bill so that the dude doesn't get into his head that you owe him anything? I wouldn't be surprised if he still paid even if you tried though. Either way, you did nothing wrong and it was creepy. I assume you were in similar industries. You exchanged business cards and you indicated you wanted to learn more about what he does. Seems like networking to me. Also sounds like he used that to try and leverage it into a date. This is all on him. On the other hand, it's also important that when he starts saying things to you about how pretty you are and being with him, you need to make it clear that's not what you're there for. You don't just go along with it. Oh, thank good I'm not the only one this has happened to, lol. I think we've all been there, and it comes from a misunderstanding that is likely intentional. I've been on more than a few let's hangouts that I realized halfway through were actually dates. In one situation, the person initially invited a bunch of people as a group thing, then about 30 minutes prior changed where the two of us would meet up, and then she had a whole evening planned for just us. I was an hour in before I realized it was a date. I'm dumb about stuff like that, too, so it didn't help. Yeah, I don't think you fucked up. This is just terrible communication on the guy's side. I guess he wanted to shoot his shot, but he could have been clearer about his intentions, especially if you said that you'd like to know more about what he does for work. I suppose he interpreted it as you being interested in him and not what he does. Which is on him. Why did I feel creeped out by his every word and action? The easiest way to clarify this is so message him and thank him for the meal, compliment his choice of restaurant and tell him you like the place so much that your partner and you plan to celebrate your anniversary there. If he was being genuinely nice, he won't mind. If he had other motives, well, problem solved, wouldn't you say? Either way, you'll be able to clarify the situation without any awkwardness. We used to tell the youth we worked with that if it could be a date you should assume the other person thinks it's a date until you specify it's not a date. A lot of young people don't end up having a relationship-defining talk until date 2-3. I understand in today's day and age there are people hooking up before they ever go out, but I think it still applies. People are bad at communicating. Now in the OP scenario it sounded to me like it was specified as a networking meeting and her potential suitor misunderstood. The assistant thing is kinda cringe. Power play. Might be best to speak with him and apologize if you gave the wrong impression. Alight, need to sub for an update. OP, you didn't tell us the fallout and what happened next after. I think this is less about genders and more about generational difference. A 50-year-old man would think a dinner with a woman is a date, whereas a 20s, 30s man would know that it doesn't have to be a date to have dinner with a woman. I think unless it's your mother or relative siblings, a one-on-one dinner between man and woman is most likely considered a date in most countries. Heck, in Arab countries you could be fined or to jail for even considering to go to dinner with a man while not married to him. Geez, people just need to be upfront about what they're scheduling. I'm a guy and I grab food with coworkers all the time. I usually do include a group to avoid misunderstandings, however. I had a similar situation. Went to a pizza joint with a golf friend. Didn't know it was a date until after I dropped him off and he confessed in a frustrated manner. After some time he also confessed he had to take a shit that night because of the pizza. Which explains his frustration. Felt horrible. Tons of women do this every single weekend just for the free food, no drinks. This is actually a great story. And sounds like he didn't do anything too stupid or forward. I, on the other hand, have done the opposite. Assumed dinner was a date, when it was very awkward toward the end of the night. I eventually learned to just ask, is this a date? If it makes you feel any better, I made a friend at an indoor playground because our kids were playing together. Exchanged numbers. Met for coffee. Then he pitched me on way. I'll take an accidental date over way. I think. Guys are terrible at reading signals or the lack of them. Source me, a guy. When I went off to college I attended a university in a large city, and I come from a small town. The type of town where a movie theater is 45 minutes away, mall 2 hours. Anyway, I'm enjoying college life and a few of us became friendly with an RA. I had a boyfriend at the time, but the RA asked if I've been to the Cheesecake Factory. I'm a nerd, and love cheesecake, So I was like sweet a factory for cheesecake thinking it was some tour. I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, to an obvious